Good afternoon, it's Thursday the 25th of January 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, of course, Mike Robinson. Criminals.
Yeah, we're getting straight off with crime. Crime statistics are out from the police. Crime has gone up by 14% in the last 12 months, according to what are being described as official police figures. Robbery, muggings, burglary. So here we go. Domestic burglary up 32%. Robbery was at about 29%. Knife crime up 21%. Overall 14%. So that's good stuff. Drug offences though have fallen. Non-domestic burglary crimes have fallen. But in every other area, crime has increased. So the question is this as a result of economic issues? General rise in poverty? Is this because there is less money going into the police, or perhaps the police are being sent on different types of police work, like policing, or rather bullying fracking protesters and this type of stuff, rather than dealing with real crime? Brian, any thoughts?
Well, I think we've got all of those sorts of things going on, Mike. We know that the police are no longer policing such things as burglaries. People reporting to us that on going to the police to report a small crime, the police say, well, we really can't deal with it. And as you say, the police resources being pulled across to bully protesters in fracking and other things. But the economic climate, I know what's coming up next. People, very hard times. People are very short of money. And when people get desperate, they do desperate things. So I think that a large part of this is the real economic climate and the suffering of people in the country.
Which brings us into the homelessness statistics, which are also out today. So 4,751 counted or estimated to be on the streets during autumn of 2017. That's a 15% rise on the year before. Somebody in the chat box saying 169% rise in homelessness since 2010. So it's okay though, Brian, because the government says it's investing £550 million by 2020 to address the issue. Now, call me a cynic if you like, but I suspect that £550 million will not address the issues that are causing people to end up on the streets. That money will be spent on making sure that they are scraped off the streets and dumped in some other location.
Well, that's it, isn't it, Mike? Because, of course, we've seen this in London, we've seen this in other big cities. They don't want homeless people on the streets. So what sort of thing were they doing? Well, in London, they were producing sort of wire meshes to keep homeless people out of spots that they would know that would be warm at night. So we don't want to see these homeless people on the streets, certainly not in rich areas. We want to keep it out of sight of the public if it can. But the government simply doesn't care. And of course, many people haven't got a job or they're unfit and they can't get benefits because they're being assessed as fit by the Department of Work and Pensions.
But don't worry, we're going to deal with extremism, and Sara has been appointed the new extremism Tzar, perhaps you might describe her as. She's going to lead the Commission for Countering Extremism. She's apparently an experienced campaigner and a charity leader, and she's expected to take up her job in February. She was selected apparently following an open, rigorous and transparent recruiting process. Now, we did report in September last year that they were going to start recruiting for this job, but we haven't heard anything about it between then and now, so it was fully transparent.
Well, I think I'm going to be able to help with how that transparency worked, Mike.
Okay, so this role is for a period of 3 years, and apparently they're going to provide the government with impartial external advice on the tools, policies and approaches needed to tackle extremism. They're going to support the public sector, communities and civil society to confront extremism wherever it exists. They're going to promote fundamental pluralistic British values, and initially they will widely and openly enter a discussion about extremism and British values, and individuals from all areas of society independently selecting who it will engage with. So it's going to select who it will engage with. So it's open, it's transparent, it's available to all individuals from all areas of society, but they're going to select who it is that gets to take part.
It's a very serious subject, Mike. I am smiling because, of course, utter lies in the press about what's actually going on here, and it doesn't take much to get a feel for it. But could we assume that we need an anti-extremism Tzar, because the government knows full well that there's going to be an increase in sort of extremist type activity?
Of course, she's not being called an anti-extremism Tzar. It's a commission for countering extremism, but the anti gets dropped off in most.
Right, okay. Well, some controversy, bring on The Guardian. The choice of the News UK's anti-extremism chief has been criticised as alarming. And this is former Tory Chair Saida Warzi. She says, well, Sara Khan is a mouthpiece for the Home Office. So that's pretty direct. We will see in a minute whether that's justified. But let's bring on the illustrious Home Secretary, because we've got a bit more of her words here. The Commission for Countering Extremism form a crucial part of this government's work to stop the scourge of extremism in all its forms. And Sara Khan is expertly qualified to lead its important work. She'll bring wealth of experience. It will prove vital to identify and challenge extremism. And we just bring in that one, the independent advice. This is very important stuff. So we've got it in again that this is the woman and she's going to be independent. Well, the Amber Rudd went on here. The body was tasked with those pluralistic British values. It's going to produce an assessment of the threat, and it's going to help train schools and colleges to spot warning signs, but it's also working for women's rights. So this is a dual role body, Mike. This is not about extremism, just extremism, because it's also about women's rights.
Well, it's not about Islamic extremism. But men's rights might be considered an extremist topic.
I think that's definitely on the cards. So there we are. This is what it's going to do. But what we find very quickly, of course, is that the lady herself, Sara Khan, had set up this charity, Inspire, empowering women, strengthening societies. It's also trying to counter extremist ideology. And then if we get into that, it gets interesting. I'll make sure I've got this on the other screen so that I can read it. It says, if you get into the text, this is just a flavour of some of our work. Remarkably, we've never had more than 2 full-time and 1 part-time employee in carrying out such cutting-edge initiatives and projects. Our funding has included donations from the public and private philanthropists, support from foundations and charities, including the Sigrid Rousing Trust and Barrow Cadbury, and in the case of our anti-ISIS project, the Home Office. But for clarity's sake, we've never received core funding from the Home Office, nor received any fund from them for over 2 years, since the end of our Making a Stand campaign. So they're really desperate here, Mike, to point out that although they have been funded by the Home Office, they haven't really been funded by the Home Office.
Right.
So the lady who was able to set up a charity with funding for the Home Office is now, as part of an independent selection process, selected to be the chair of the new organisation.
But this is a charity which is designed to empower women, but also fights ISIS.
Well, you know, once you've got the skill to take on the world, Mike, you can do anything.
Right, okay.
Okay, so you see where we're going. It's independent. This has nothing to do with the government, except the Home Office has funded it. And after the Home Office has funded it, they've chosen this person to lead it. So we've got the Cadbury, the Barrow Cadbury Trust in there. People need to look at these trusts because they have huge amounts of money. They're about introducing policy which affects all matters political and community, but they always say they're independent. But I was fascinated by this one because I'd never heard of it. Here's the Sigrid Rousing Trust. And I'm sorry to be blunt, but we've got some Swedish woman involved in writing and producing books. And there's something about Tetra Pak millions, but she's putting the money into a supposedly independent charity which is helping to tell British society how it should run itself.
Good stuff.
Okay, we'll leave our viewers and listeners to do some more research into what that organisation actually is. But this is one of the key things that we're seeing. If you don't like the political policy, research where that policy is coming from.
We should probably also say that, of course, we are not in any way suggesting that women should not have equality with men in this, but there's a political agenda once again being pushed forward through the various campaigns, and I'm watching with fascination how the people that have traditionally campaigned on women's rights at the moment seem to be fighting amongst themselves, because we've got Germaine Greer, for example, criticising the people pushing the Me Too campaign, and they are then criticising her back. And there seems to be a lot of fractiousness going on within what has traditionally been the women's rights community.
Well, I think this is coming about, Mike, because the policy itself is false. It's created policy. And of course, nobody should be campaigning for women's rights, because technically that's at the exclusion for LGBT++. So if we look at any person standing up now and say they are campaigning for women's rights, what they're actually doing is starting to suppress other people that the government says should have equal rights. So I think the policy is now revealing itself to be utter nonsense. Bring in the Prime Minister.
Well, indeed, perfect timing. She is at Davos today, and in fact giving her speech at this minute, if I'm correct. She is telling everybody that, well, she's got to reclaim the narrative, and the way that they've got to do that is to deal with these big tech companies. So this is just another speech from Treason May about censorship on the internet. She says that Facebook and Twitter can make a big difference to making sure that services are trustworthy and safe. She's saying that no one wants to be known as a terrorist platform or the first choice app for pedophiles. She's not too concerned about the Houses of Parliament perhaps being one of the first choice locations for...
No, these people are above the law, Mike,
yes.
So.
And she went on to say that investors can play a vital role by considering the social impact of the companies they're investing in. So she's calling on shareholders now to get involved in the discussion about how Twitter and Facebook censor comment, and they can use their influence apparently to ensure that these issues are taken seriously. But she also wants to see companies using encryption perhaps be a bit more sensible. And she focused on Telegram in particular as being the platform that apparently terrorists and other extremists are using.
And pedophiles are using.
These companies have some of the best brains in the world. They must focus their brightest and best on meeting these fundamental social responsibilities. So that's great. So this is her focus. Her focus is all about shutting down free speech, shutting down the narrative, making sure there's no criticism of government. On the other hand, the Chinese focus has been on economic development in the world. So this is Liu He, who is the Chief Economic Advisor to President Xi. He's leading the Chinese delegation to Davos this year. And he said, you know, the Chinese are intending to change their focus slightly from, they've obviously been focusing on high-speed growth, but now they want to focus on high-quality growth and development. They want to see the Chinese per capita income rise from $8,000 to $10,000 a year by 2020. He said that the purpose that they intend to bring the financial system into better conformity. People criticizing the levels of debt in China, as if anybody in the West is in a position to criticize Chinese debt levels. But he said that they're going to prevent financial risks and make the financial system more adaptable in order to better serve the real economy. And he said that, of course, the Belt and Road Initiative extremely significant, that it's open to all nations. Then he went back to the financial crisis, and he said that at such a critical moment, we must focus on the spillovers of the monetary policy of the world's major economies and on changes in the debt, equity and commodity markets in the short term. In the medium term, we need to pay attention to the question of productivity and the changing savings rates in large economies. So he finished off by saying, as long as we firmly establish the awareness of the community of human destiny and work together to help each other and overcome difficulties, we will certainly be able to make the world a better place. The point is, it was a positive message, and what did Theresa May go with? Just the same nonsense that she's been banging on about for quite some time. We've got to stop talking to each other.
Yep.
Now, defence and defence spending. Well, I was quite amused by the image that the Telegraph chose to put on this article. The headline is Britain should spend 2.5% of GDP on defence if it wants to play a proper part in the world. This is written by Michael Fallon, the erstwhile Defence Secretary, resigned, of course, towards the end of last year. And of course, we got this picture of the HMS Queen Elizabeth there with the F35 on it, except it's not an F35, it's merely a cardboard cutout. I'm exaggerating slightly. It's a carefully constructed model, mock-up, because of course it doesn't fly terribly well. We'll come on to that in a second. But anyway, Michael Fallon has said that he warned Theresa May last year that the military cuts were too deep. He said that although Britain is meeting its obligations of 2% of GDP to meet its obligations to NATO, he said that because the pound had reduced in value, that of course was squeezing budgets. He said almost every monthly meeting of the Defence Board that I chaired saw repeated calls for more money for overrunning equipment programmes, for urgently needed improvements in housing and fuel infrastructure, for the much delayed Astute submarines, for nuclear work at Aldermaston. And he said, a year ago I took these concerns to the Prime Minister. I warned that the depreciation of sterling and cost escalation in nuclear were putting severe pressure on budgets for 2017, 18 and 18 and 19. If we wanted to play a leading role with NATO, our troops and Typhoons defending our eastern flank to counter the Russian submarine threat to our deterrent, and our cables in the North Atlantic to go. So he went on a big Russian rant at that point. But 2.5%, Brian, do you think that's going to make a huge difference?
I don't think it's going to make any difference, Mike, because of course the first thing that's been done is the whole of our defence infrastructure has been infiltrated, subverted and completely broken. This is why vast amounts of money are being wasted on ever more expensive projects. Why is this happening is the key thing. Well, we just put a bit of spin here. This is the Sun. They said that, don't worry, forces cuts have been canned. Theresa May puts fresh defence cuts on hold in major victory for Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson. This is complete nonsense because the Treasury is absolutely going for more cuts. And the reason that they're going for cuts is to achieve this unified structure with the French. So at the moment, the UK defence budget is about 36 billion, French about 32. We're being told now very strongly the objective is to cut back the British budget so that they get that unified status.
So 32 billion on each
parity,
side.
Parity. And at the top there, we've said there are no votes in defence. Well, it isn't defence, it's EU defence. This is why the government can't talk about it, because we know that basically everything to do with this unified EU military structure is now going to be driven by the partnership arrangements with France. So this all happens off to one side. Nobody talks about the European Union. It's all Franco-British Council agreements with the French. So this is highly political, Mike. We've got Britain's defence industry being destroyed. It's being cut back for the EU parity. I know where you're going now, so
well, I mean,
bring it on.
Yes, you've mentioned the huge amounts of money being put into stupid projects. Well, here is one of them. We reported last week that Gavin Williamson had been flying an F-35 in a simulator, at least. That seems to be about the only way you can fly an F-35 at the moment, because the Office of the Director, Operational Test and Evaluation in the United States has issued its 2017 annual report. And unfortunately for the F-35, the operational suitability of the F-35 fleet remains at a level below service expectations and is dependent on workarounds that would not be acceptable in combat situations. Over the previous year, that's 2017, Most suitability metrics have remained nearly the same or moved only within narrow bands, which are insufficient to characterize a trend of performance. So let's have a look at some of the things that they said. They said overall fleet-wide monthly availability rates remain around 50%, a condition which has existed with no significant improvement since October 2014, despite the increasing number of new aircraft. One notable trend, however, is an increase in the percentage of fleet that cannot fly while waiting for replacement parts, and this covers the entire fleet, including the F35B variant, which is the variant that we are getting. The program will likely not meet the mean flight hours between critical failures threshold without redesigning aircraft components, Brian.
So this thing hasn't even come into service and they're already talking about having to redesign components.
Variant-specific average monthly availability rates were relatively consistent for this period, 51% for the F35A, 46% for the F35B, and 54% for the F35C. So our variant flies the least because it is the worst. Now, under the heading of not mission capable for maintenance, the average monthly not mission capable for maintenance rate was 15%. Now they had a goal of not more than 15%, so coincidentally they seem to have met that. The monthly not capable for maintenance rate exhibited little trend up or down. The F35B variant was down for maintenance more than the 35A or the 35C, averaging 18%. Now, on cybersecurity, they said that cybersecurity testing in 2017 showed that some of the vulnerabilities identified during earlier testing periods had not been remedied. So a year later and no progress has been made. They then went on to talk about physiological incidents, and of course the main physiological incident is the issue of oxygen starvation on board. And they say that multiple pilot physiological events were reported in 2017, with the majority of them from Luke Air Force Base, Arizona. No common root cause has been identified. The program is investigating the possibility of onboard oxygen generation system degradations in the fleet. At the time of this report, testing of a new algorithm to control the oxygen generator was in progress at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. And then they started talking about production line quality lapses. They said the program recently discovered corrosion in an F-35A at Hill Air Force Base, possibly due to Lockheed Martin not properly treating fastener holes with primer after drilling during production. At the time of this report, the program was still investigating, but it appears to be a production line quality lapse which may affect all variants. And then they said that JPO suspended durability testing for the F-35B, that's our variant, after completion of second lifetime testing in February 2017. The test article had so many repairs it was no longer representative of the production aircraft. This is staggering. They said with regard to tires for the F-35B, the program has struggled to find a tire for the F-35B that is strong enough for conventional high-speed landings and soft enough to cushion vertical landings and still light enough for the existing aircraft structure. Average F-35B tire life is below 10 landings, well below the requirement for 25 conventional full-stop landings. With regard to night vision cameras, they said the night vision camera used in the Gen 3 helmet has several deficiencies, including inadequate acuity for low illumination operations, i.e. during cloudy night with no stars, moon, or cultural lighting. As a result, F-35B pilots were losing situational awareness during night landings on aircraft carriers. Okay, F-35Bs and F-35Cs cannot be refueled in mid-air because the probe tips are breaking too often, and the program is still investigating this problem. And then on the issue of whether any aircraft are fully mission capable, Brian, the F-35A it has a fully mission capable rate of 34%, but that's significantly higher than other variants. The F-35B has a fully mission capable rate of 14% and the C at 15%. This is absolutely staggering.
Well, it's a national scandal, Mike, and of course remember that all of this has been done on the basis that a perfectly good Harrier fleet with the three aircraft carriers to operate them was scrapped with no replacement, leaving a huge hole. And then we're told, don't worry, we're getting these for the UK super carriers, the Queen Elizabeth class. and then along comes this. And of course, there's no part of British industry in this, so no jobs. Why have we got people sleeping on the streets? Because there are no jobs, because British industry has been given away to foreign companies, and that's still continuing.
So we mentioned the hypoxia issue and the fact that oxygen systems being turned off for pilots. This is not a good situation. Well, this is Navy Times. Sorry, the headline is Head of Navy Physiological Episodes Team to Vacate the Role in the Summer. This is Rear Admiral Sara Clutch Joyner, apparently, who started the Navy Physiological Episodes Action Team in August, and she's already leaving. But she's leaving to get a promotion. She's going to go on to assignment for the Joint Staff, according to a Pentagon press release. But in the meantime, Brian, she has said that physiological episodes occur in many airframes and can arise whenever a person is fed oxygen in a pressurized environment. And she said that FA-18s and F Super Hornets and EA-18G Growlers all suffer the same problem. And I'm sorry, but I find this very unlikely. And I wonder whether she was given the promotion on the basis of making that statement. Is that too far-fetched?
I'm going to slightly stick up this. I think she got too close initially, because one of the early reports, she actually started to talk about these oxygen problems and contaminated air, which I thought was interesting. That suddenly came in. I think she's been promoted out of the job to shut her up. But if this is the state of the US Air Force at the moment, then it's in a perilous state, because if you can't trust oxygen supply in an aircraft, that aircraft is lethal. That's all you can say, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, a few days ago, we mentioned that Theresa May had launched the Cabinet Office's fake news unit. Well, I thought this was a fantastic headline from The Independent. Not often we can say that. Here we go. The first target of Theresa May's fake news unit should be her own cabinet. Now, in general, the article is decrying the issue of fake news, and the first few paragraphs inevitably contain the word Trump. But nonetheless, they say that, to put it brutally, the figures are being fiddled and the real extent of the NHS crisis is being downplayed. He says, I can't help wondering whether the Prime Minister's commitment to accuracy is a little hollow, given her government's enthusiasm for perhaps not actual fake news, but smoke and mirrors, jiggery, pokery, cooking the books and being economical with the truth. The most glaring example is the NHS. And then goes on to talk about Boris Johnson and so on. But nonetheless, I thought it was an interesting headline for a mainstream newspaper.
It is, and I think we've got to remember that although we might not like the press, and we may disagree with what a lot of the material that journalists are writing, that does not mean to say that all journalists are so isolated they can't see at least some of the things happening. My biggest criticism is the journalists never join the dots. They never look at the problems in one area and say, hang on a minute, this has got to be linked in another area. Because if you look at the country at the moment, we can say everything is falling apart. The government's untrustworthy, it's putting out fake news. The police can't do their job, the military can't do their job, the NHS can't do their job, school teachers can't do their job. This is not accidental. This is policy, and the policy has been to create chaos. We know this is fact because two Conservative MPs, a candidate, Kruger, and the MP, Nicholas Bowles, said in public it was the Conservative Party's intention to create what they called constructive chaos. We're now living it. So where we need to focus is on the policy. Well, let's come back to the President's Club, because this story is getting more and more interesting. We'll just recap slightly with an little extra bit. Here's the Financial Times article written by somebody who calls themselves Miss Marriage. Who is this woman, Mike? I think it's time we knew the real identity of this young lady, because I think she's been involved in something immensely dirty. Now, either she's so naive she was easy to put up with it, or she knows what she's doing. But this was part of the original story that she wrote. All these financiers that attended this charity event where women are being groped, men are exposing themselves, prostitutes were present. She said this: from the world of politics were Nadhim Zahawi, newly appointed Under Secretary of State for Children and Families, and Jonathan Mendelsohn, a Labour peer and party fundraiser. So I'm very interested in who was there at the event and the reporting around these people. So remember that all the charities that the President's club were giving money were children's charities. This is a very interesting fact. So here's John Mendelsohn, mentioned in the Jewish Chronicle, grown closer to the leader. They're talking about Ed Miliband. He's regarded as another go-to Jewish figure in the party. But at the time, excuse me, they're saying this man, former fundraiser. So we've got the fundraisers for the Labour Party, or former fundraisers, going to this sort of event, mixing with some very, in my opinion, dubious people. But it's not just Labour, of course, because we can hop over to the Conservative Party, where we've got David Mellor, a businessman behind the President Club's charity dinner, has stepped down from his government post after an undercover report revealed shocking stories of sexism and harassment at the event. So he stepped down as a non-executive director for the Department for Education. So he's helping to run an organisation getting money for children, children's charities. Then he's involved in education. And then we're seeing the behaviour that this young lady from the Times is reporting. So we've got another Guardian one here. And again, David Mellor gets a comment in the Jewish Chronicle. He was appointed a CBE for services to education. He's founder of the Mellor Educational Trust and chair of the National Apprenticeship Ambassadors Network. His business is one of the largest luxury home and beauty suppliers in UK. So he hops from business across into education, and then he starts to get involved with the government, but he's also raising money for the Tory party. I think if we had a little look inside Theresa May's mind, we might get something like this. We were quite happy using David Mellor's money to fund the Conservative Party, but now the public see him for what he really is. He obviously has to step down from the Department of Education. So this is where the press does not go, Miss Marriage does not go. She doesn't start to ask the serious questions as to who these immensely wealthy businessmen, celebrities are, fundraisers for the political parties. Who are they? Why are they doing this? And why is it that their sole interest is in children's charities? I have to say, I don't know what's going on, but I get an uneasy feeling about it. So what's sort of coming out of this? Well, this caught my attention here because here was the Times President's Club closes after groping scandal. And then there's some talk about the guest list. Now, originally they reported that Mr. Sadawi, the Minister for Families and Children, was at the event. It appears he was, because he's now been reprimanded by the Chief Whip. But he said he didn't stay there long.
Yeah.
He left.
He left before the shenanigans began.
Yeah, but the Chief Whip's had a word with him. It's not a problem really. But another man connected with the education of children is now tied in with these particularly interesting attendees at the party. So the Guardian actually put out an excerpt from the guest list. This is a little video. I encourage people to actually have a look at their site themselves. I think this is going to run. So we've got all sorts of people. We've got billionaires, we've got hedge fund people, we've got celebrities, we've got internet entrepreneurs. It goes on and on and on. And when we get down to the bottom, I'm absolutely fascinated at the name that came up. So the important thing is the Guardian's wasn't able to confirm that all of them attended, but they're saying these are the people that actually were allocated tables. And what's happening now is Theresa May is saying, well, we need gagging orders for women, you know, we need to target the gagging orders that prevent women from reporting sexual harassment. That's what Theresa is apparently saying today.
Why were so are they saying that the women that were hostesses at this thing, as part of their contracts, were not allowed to speak about it afterwards? Is that what?
Well, this appears to be what Miss Marriage says, but this is why it's becoming more and more interesting, this thing at the moment, because a lot of people, including those who attended, are saying, I did not see this stuff going on. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? But on the other hand, you can say, was this some form of scam by the Financial Times and Miss Marriage itself? I just wanted our viewers to note that screen. Apologies to Treason May because I've missed an E out of her name. But Treason May has Melanie Shaw locked up in solitary confinement for blowing the whistle as a child abuse whistleblower. So that's what Treason May, as Home Secretary, did to Melanie Shaw. She helped put her in prison to make sure she couldn't whistleblow on the MPs involved in the abuse of children. And now, when we have a bit of groping, which involves people helping fund the Conservative Party, we're going to target the gagging orders against these women. This is hypocrisy on a scale which is utterly breathtaking. So this was the man at the end of the guest list, Poju Zabludowicz. Recognise his name straight away. They said billionaire chief executive of the fund manager Tamara's group. But of course, there's a lot more to it than that. And let's put it on screen, because this man, Finnish-born Mr. Zabludowicz, his family's fortune came from Israeli arms manufacturing. But of course, he's also been donating money, a lot of it, to the Tory party, £15,000 to Cameron's leadership campaign. And then going back into 2010, 131,805 to the Conservative Party, a mere 800,000 to the British Israel Communications Organisation, which is tied right into the Tory party. There was also some allegations that he was tied into the Liam Fox defence scandal. And the best bit for many people will be that his wife Anita ran an art exhibition in a former Methodist chapel at Chalk Farm, London, which featured a statue of Christ with an erection. So this, Mike, is the quality of the people that were present at that event, which was partly headed up by a man who was a non-executive director for the Department of Education. Are you feeling comfortable with this? Because I'm certainly not. Let's just remind ourselves that basically around the President's Club, we had this raft of children's charities. And in the middle of the screen there in text, I've just added in the type of people that were there. And I find it very difficult that these immensely wealthy men who could probably spend 10% of their wealth and solve a lot of the children's poverty problems overnight, I don't get it. They're there, and if we believe Miss Marriage, they are essentially abusing young women.
Yeah.
So I'll just remind people of the analysis that UK Column did a few weeks ago to the Tory party. We showed that, of course, key to understanding the Tory party was to understand where the money has come from. We've now given you a little insight into that. But of course, we've then got a Tory party which is using behavioural insights team to target the general public. It's making sure that there's control of the Tory party through the whips. And we put up the picture top right of Tim Fortescue, who was openly admitting that when he was a Conservative Party whip, they were using blackmail around the abuse of young boys to control what people did in the Tory party. So I better just put up the present chief whip, Julian Smith, because he would have been the person who sanitised Mr. Zahardwi. But he said, well, you did attend, but you didn't really do anything wrong. So where's the BBC taken this lot? Well, we're now asking a question. Should men-only business events be a thing of the past? So I think Miss Marriage is there in the picture. There she is. This is the journalist who started all this. It's now gone from not identifying those key funders, but now we've got a political agenda. Should we start to get rid of the idea of a men-only business event?
So we're going to legislate?
We're going to legislate, I think, Mike.
More centralised control. Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, are we able to mention Mr.
No,
Crane?
that's it.
We're not. Okay. We'll end there. We'll come back onto this key theme that if you want to understand why things are going wrong in the UK at the moment, then start to look at government policy and start to look at where that policy comes from. And one thing we can be sure of, that policy does not come from free, open, transparent debate in Westminster. This is policy cooked up within the civil service, now highly politicised, and also, of course, within the depths of the Conservative Party itself through the Cabinet Office and its non-government organisation agents. So we're going to say to our audience today, if you're interested in what we're starting to unravel there with the Tory party, perhaps you'd help us by investigating yourself. And of course, we'd love to receive any research that you're doing. In the meantime, don't book any flights on F35B Airways. It could be unpleasant. And we'll report more on that in due course. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.